Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the City of Bellingham Special City Council meeting tonight. The first order of business is roll call. And Marie's outside, so Jack Weiss.
Terry Borneman.
Terry Borneman. Roxanne Murphy.
Here.
Gene Knutson here. Pinky Vargas.
Here.
Dan Hamill. Here. Michael Lillquist.
Here.
Okay, would you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thank you all for coming tonight. What we're going to do, we're going to have 4 people to present on the topics. We received their names from the Auditor's Office as committee members for the various charter amendments. We will have presentations on Proposition 1, 2, and 3. Speaking for Propositions 1, 2, and 3 is Carl Appiano. Speaking against Proposition 1, 2, and 3 is Iris Mott Gibson. We will draw their names out of the cup to see who goes first, and I'm going to have Peter Raffato read the titles of those 3 propositions.
Okay, Peter Raffato, Legal Department. And I'll read the first 3, save Proposition 9 for when that presentation will occur. Proposition 1, method of electing council members. And by the way, I'll be reading the ballot title with the explanatory statement from the auditor's website. Proposition 1, method of electing council members. The Whatcom County Charter Review Commission has proposed an amendment to the Whatcom County Charter concerning the method of electing county council members. This measure would amend Charter Section 2.13 to provide for election of county council members by voters only from within the council district from which the candidate was nominated, except for the at-large position, which would continue to be selected by voters from the entire county. Explanatory statement. Presently, all council members, though selected in the primary election by voters only from within the district in which the candidate resides, are elected by voters from the entire county in the general election, regardless of a voter's district of residence. The proposed amendment, if adopted, would change that so that in the general election, voters from each district would vote only for those candidates who reside within a voter's district, except if candidates are running for an at-large position, in which case all voters, regardless of district of residence, would vote for a candidate for the at-large position. Proposition 2, limiting power of council to amend charter. The Whatcom County Charter Review Commission has proposed an amendment to the Whatcom County Charter limiting the power of the council to propose charter amendments. This measure would amend Charter Section 8.23 to prohibit the county council from proposing charter amendments to previous counter-charter amendments that have been approved by a 2/3 majority of voters, except if the council adopts a proposal for such amendment by a 7-0 vote. Explanatory statement. Currently, the county council may propose charter amendments if 5 of 7 council members vote to adopt an ordinance presenting such proposal to the voters. This amendment, proposed by the Charter Review Commission, if adopted, would alter that requirement where the voters had previously approved an amendment on a matter by at least a 2/3 majority. New proposals by the council to further amend the charter on that matter could only be presented to the voters if adopted by a unanimous vote of all council members. A yes vote for this amendment is incompatible with a yes vote for Proposition number 10. Proposition 3, limiting power of council to amend charter's election provisions. The Whatcom County Charter Review Commission has proposed an amendment to the Whatcom County Charter limiting the power of the council to propose charter amendments. This measure would amend Charter Section 8.23 to prohibit the county council from proposing any charter amendments to Charter Sections 2.12 or 2.13, which pertain to the method of nominating and electing county council members, except if the council adopts a proposal for such amendment by a 7-0 vote. Explanatory statement. Currently, the county council may propose charter amendments if 5 of 7 council members vote to adopt an ordinance presenting such proposal to the voters. This amendment, proposed by the Charter Review Commission, if adopted, would change that requirement when the Council is proposing amendments to Charter Sections 2.12 and 2.13, which address the election of council members. A proposal to amend these particular sections could only be presented to the voters if the Council adopted such a proposal by a unanimous vote of all council members. A yes vote for this amendment is incompatible with a yes vote for Proposition Number 10.
Okay, thank you, Peter. We will now see who goes first. And Pinky, you want to draw a name out of there? Okay, Iris Mott Gibson will be going first. And each presenter will have 15 minutes to present, and then we will open up the public hearing.
All right. Thank you so much, Terry, for organizing this forum, and for the council members and staff for helping to put this together. And thank you all for being here tonight to learn about these important issues. And if you're listening at home, thank you for engaging and learning more about the important ballot propositions that will be on our ballots in just a few short weeks. My name is Iris Mott Gibson, and I'm here to present opposition to Propositions 1, 2, and 3. I'm not an elected official, and I didn't write any of the propositions. I'm not here representing any partisan special interests. I'm here because I love Whatcom County. I'm proud to live in a place that not only boasts diversity in our landscape, but in the values and the industries and cultures that comprise the 36 communities within Whatcom County. And I think that there's no better way to honor the multiplicity of voices in our communities than by ensuring that each of our voices are heard when it comes to electing our county council members. Our former president, Jimmy Carter, called in our country to not become a melting pot, but a beautiful mosaic with each of our interests and our dreams and our yearnings represented. Whatcom County certainly is quite a mosaic. But unfortunately, our outdated and gerrymandered 3 districts are drawn in a way that blends and slices the interests of our county, silencing voters. As you will see on the map in this whirling presentation, you'll note that our current 3 districts split Bellingham into 3, and there's a little bit of Bellingham in every district, and then it stretches out in a long, narrow way and encompasses so many different interests into one district. It's an outdated system, and you'll hear in a little bit from Tim about an idea that will increase the amount of districts to 5. So I'd like to share 4 reasons that I oppose district-only voting. It limits our voice on county council on issues that affect us all. It will divide our council into political factions, producing partisanship and gridlock. It is the product of a Tea Party plot to rig our elections to pass the coal train, and it's unfair to both rural and urban voters. I read Mr. Appiano's remarks in the voter guide, and I noticed that it doesn't say plainly what that district-only voting does. It doesn't say that instead of voting for all 7 council members, that you will only get to vote for 3 of our 7 county council members. Right now, we can pick up the phone, and you can call all 7 council members. They have to answer, and they have to listen. It's their job. They represent all of us. And if, with district-only voting, only 3 council members will need to answer your call. In approaching these ballot measures, I think it's really important that we understand the breadth and depth of what our county council does. County council determines whether there's enough water and whether it's safe to drink. County council determines our local tax structure and the funding for social services so many of us depend on. County council determines where growth occurs growth occurs and the use of our land. Do any of these issues only affect one part of Whatcom County? Do you want to have a real say when it comes to drinking water, our local economy, land use, and criminal justice? Then you should be able to take part in electing all of our county council members. Another significant issue that our county council will impact is the proposed coal terminal. District-only voting is created and supported by pro-coal special interests. They are trying to fundamentally alter our elections to benefit the coal industry. According to an email from Commissioner Chet Dow, in quote, "At some point it is likely that County Council will cast votes concerning whether or not to issue the needed permits for the coal shipping terminal. This is why I believe that all other topics pale in comparison to getting Amendment 1 enacted," unquote. Propositions 1, 2, and 3 are not about fair representation, as Mr. Appiano will tell you. They promote divisive and political gridlock. When an extreme Tea Party faction didn't like the outcome of the 2009 countywide elections, they took their interest to the backroom dealings of the Charter Review Commission to rig the system. Conversely, when citizens from across Whatcom County came to the commission with the idea for 5 fair and equal districts and weren't given a fair review, we took our issue to the people instead of the back rooms. We gathered thousands of signatures from across Whatcom County to get 5 fair and equal districts on the ballot. Proposition 1 is poorly designed, and our current system may be illegal under Washington law. District lines are not allowed to divide communities, but the current 3 districts does just that, gerrymandering our county so that voices of some are drowned out, while others are given an unfair level of influence. If we're going to vote by district, we need to set up a new set of districts to be set up fairly and legally. District-only elections will entrench ideological factions and threaten to tear our county apart. Now to transition to Propositions 2 and 3. Proposition 2, as you heard, would require a unanimous vote of County Council to even place a proposal on the ballot so that we as the voters can consider amending the county charter. Proposition 3 would make it nearly impossible for Whatcom County Council to propose amendments to the charter, also by requiring a unanimous vote. I'd like to quote our very own County Councilman, Pete Kremen, who described Propositions 2 and 3 as simply un-American. The 3 reasons that I believe you should reject Propositions 2 and 3 that I'll share are that a supermajority is all that's required in our United States Congress to amend the U.S. Constitution or the Washington Constitution, that Proposition 2 and 3 would create impossible government gridlock, and that it would enable just one council member to block any proposals. So a supermajority, which is 2/3 of vote, is required to amend the United States Constitution, as well as the Washington Constitution and the Whatcom County Charter, our county's constitution. A supermajority vote secured women the right to vote through the 19th Amendment. Does anyone remember what year? 1921. To the U.S. Constitution. If it had required a unanimous vote to amend the U.S. Constitution, when do you think women would have gotten the right to vote? We might still be standing on the steps of the Capitol today. I bet that many folks in this room have served on a board or attended a public meeting or even held elected office. And if so, you've probably used Robert's Rules of Order. If not, you probably have no idea what I'm talking about, but Robert's Rules is what governs our local governments all the way up to our federal government. And being kind of a policy wonk, I decided to do some research. And I found that under Robert's Rules, there is no scenario in which a unanimous vote should ever be requested. I also found that there's 0 instances of a unanimous vote being requested by any other city, state, or federal government in a similar manner. This is an impossible hurdle. It means that one person on council would have veto power over any proposal considered. Imagine if this was implemented in Congress, we'd be giving Ted Cruz veto power, something I think that many of us might be a little uncomfortable with. I read the voter guide statements for Proposition 2 and 3, and I was struck by a few logical fallacies. They state that this would give bad ideas a reasonable amount of time to succeed. In reality, this would mean forever, trapping our county into a gridlocked political faction that would accomplish nothing. Their statements also argue that voters are unable to decipher ideas brought before them. With voter apathy at an all-time high, I believe we need to trust in our voters' ability to make mistakes, as do our leaders. Given the opportunity, we often correct them. In 1917, Congress amended the U.S. Constitution, banning the sale of alcohol. We all know how well that worked out, and so 16 years later, they revisited it. And with a very narrow two-thirds majority vote, we ended the prohibition of alcohol. We've done that here locally as well. The issue? District-only voting. 10 years ago, we tried district-only voting. It didn't work. And after 3 years of the failed experiment, voters took decisively to the polls to go back to electing our county council members countywide. Proposition 3 would have made that correction nearly impossible. So to reiterate, Propositions 2 and 3 would restrict majority voters' right to govern, create impossible government gridlock, and limit the voice of people. I urge you to reject Propositions 2 and 3 to protect our right to make a better future for families across Whatcom County. There are some things that Carl will share tonight that I agree with. He calls for electing council members that represent our diverse values and getting our council working together. Unfortunately, district-only voting is not the means to either of those goals. With district-only voting, you may live in Bellingham and all 3 of your council members may live in the rural county, or vice versa. It's unfair to both rural and urban residents, and it limits our council members' ability to represent the community as a whole. It doesn't have to be this way. Let's imagine a new map. Proposition 10, 5 fair and equal districts, is about decreasing factions and gridlock and creating voting districts that represent the mutual interests of all of our community members, whether they live near saltwater, in farmlands, or foothills. I'd like to close sharing an experience that touched me this summer. On the 4th of July holiday, I got to spend time with friends from go to a party with friends from the other side of the county, and they also were on the other side of the political aisle. And we were celebrating the independence of our country, we were celebrating the diversity of our country, and we were celebrating our democracy. And while we certainly don't agree on all issues, and we certainly have a lot of differences here in Whatcom County, I believe that we can work together, and I believe that we can celebrate together, and I believe that we can vote together. I trust everyone in Whatcom County to vote for my representatives, and I think that we should all move forward together with that trust and that celebration of the diversity and democracy that we have here in Whatcom County. So I urge you to vote and reject Propositions 1, 2, and 3. Thank you.
Thank you, Iris. Next up will be Carl Appiano.
Good evening, honorable council members. I'm Carl Appiano from Ferndale, the citizen formerly known as Carl U for Charter Review. I campaigned in the 3rd District, didn't win, came in 7th. You have to be in the top 5 to win. I didn't know I could bring campaign signs in with me, or I would have done that. I spent so much time and personal resources and shoe leather and invested so much in the campaign, made a lot of friends on the campaign trail, that it was hard to walk away from the Charter Review. And I became acutely interested in the issues and the process, teamed up with another candidate to create the Charter Review Task Force, which included a website and a Facebook page, as well as visiting a lot of civic groups around the county, talking about what the Charter Review was about, how the process worked. I had a goal of attending every Charter Review meeting and blogging the proceedings. And I did attend every meeting. In fact, I attended more than some of the elected commissioners. I became very familiar with the proposed amendments, how they made their way through the deliberation process, and when approached to head up a political action committee to help push some of the charter review amendments over the top, I thought it was a natural thing to do. I wish to speak in support of Charter Propositions 1, 2, and 3. Proposition 1 restores district-oriented voting for county council representatives. Propositions 2 and 3 make it harder for the county council to propose amendments to overturn district-oriented voting, as they did 8 years ago. District-oriented voting should not be a partisan issue, but for whatever reason, the left have lined up against it, and the right have lined up behind it. I actually think district-oriented voting really is about more responsive local government, and here's why I like it. District-oriented voting is well established throughout the nation. Most legislatures are elected by district. Many other charter municipalities use representation by district, including the City of Seattle and King County. You're more apt to meet your own council member when they're out campaigning, 3 times more likely to knock on your door than if canvassing the whole county. District-oriented voting makes elections more affordable, and I think this is a key point because it lowers barriers to entry. It allows a wider diversity of candidates to actually run for the office if they want to serve. It takes some of the big money out of our local politics, and it better reflects the diversity of citizens, interests, needs, and preferences of all people of Whatcom County. Some people object that district-oriented voting takes away the citizens' right to elect all of the county council. Other people resent the fact that people from other districts want to elect their representatives. So I see issues on both sides. I distributed a Think Progress article that was misleadingly entitled, "Cities Are Quietly Reviving a Jim Crow-Era Trick to Suppress Latino Votes." They're talking about they're talking about at-large voting, and here's an excerpt. Yakima, Washington is 1/3 Latino, but a Latino candidate has not been elected to the city council for almost 40 years. Santa Barbara, California is 38% Latino, but only one Latino has been elected to its council in the last 10 years. And Pasadena, Texas is 43% Hispanic, but the ethnic group is not even close to being proportionally represented in the city government. All 3 cities have been or are currently being sued for allegedly using discriminatory at-large voting systems, a voter dilution tactic that has been recently and frequently employed against Hispanic voters. In an at-large system, every city resident votes for each member of the governing body, and the city does not divide voters into districts. Now, mind you, I'm not saying that at-large voting in Whatcom County is intentionally racist, or even that we have a race problem in Whatcom County. But the effect can be felt by any minority, including rural voters. The problem in Whatcom County is the minority being underrepresented is not a protected species. The lawsuits pending in numerous cities over at-large voting are an indication that people aren't altogether happy with that, and counties aren't immune from this either. Even without the threat of a lawsuit, the predominantly progressive Seattle voluntarily passed district-oriented voting in 2013 by over 65%. So progressives must have seen something appealing about that. Now, a bit of history on this, and this is inside baseball stuff. I don't think the average person is really tuned into how we vote for our council representatives. 8 years ago, I wasn't paying attention to this stuff. I might have voted for it before I voted against it. 2 council members spearheaded the move to overturn the district-oriented voting system 8 years ago. One was a conservative facing re-election from District 1. And I don't think I have to tell you that conservatives elected from District 1 are about as scarce as hen's teeth. And that person stood a much better chance of being re-elected in a countywide vote. The other council member just didn't like the council dynamic that operated under the district-oriented model. And I have a good relationship with this person, but we disagree on that issue. People elect council members to represent us under the terms and conditions we specify in the charter. Maybe we want the council dynamic that district-oriented voting creates. Which brings us to Propositions 2 and 3. The Charter Review Commission introduced these amendments to make it harder for the County Council to overturn Proposition 1 should it pass. This is to avoid a repeat of 8 years ago. And political scientists cautioned against churn and chaos in government. So that was the reason behind this. Proposition number 2 requires a unanimous vote of the County Council to propose amendments that would override amendments passed by voters with a greater than 2/3 majority. And Proposition number 3 requires a unanimous vote of the County Council to propose amendments that would affect how they themselves are elected, a conflict of interest, if not outright corruption. These proposed amendments caused a great deal of consternation on the County Council, but one has to wonder why the Council would decide to propose amendments that would override something approved by a 2/3 majority of the voters, or in the case of that 1st District councillor, change the way they themselves are elected. I mean, at best, that gives the appearance of corruption. These 2 amendments were designed by the Charter Review Commission to be as narrowly focused as possible and address only these 2 specific issues. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the left seemed to have lined up against Propositions 1, 2, and 3, and the right seems to have lined up behind them. And coal is frequently cited as the wedge issue. But when I was out doorbelling in the 3rd District for Charter Review Commission, nobody asked me about coal. Coal was just the furthest thing from everyone's mind. These people were concerned about their lives, their livelihoods, and their lifestyles. I read in the Herald that some members of this council feel that these amendments reflect rural animosity towards Bellingham representation. I don't know, maybe. I mean, the cities are already pretty well represented. Mayors and councils lobby the county government all the time, and rural folks really have no such luxury. There is concern out in the county. Private property owners, private well owners, and family farms do feel that county government is projecting a cityfied utopian view of rural life, a million-acre park that you can visit now and then, and they're afraid that the impact is that they will be practically legislated out of existence. This is a concern they have. Now, you can't really talk much about Propositions 1, 2, and 3 without a sideways glance at Proposition 9, because 9 was produced in direct response to 1. If we're not going to use the 3 fair and equal districts we now have, why do we need 5? The districts today have practically no role with that large voting. And I keep hearing the word gerrymander trotted out. And I'm wondering how? How? No bipartisan redistricting committee, and it is bipartisan. The redistricting committees bring people in from both sides of the political spectrum. They shouldn't be able to gerrymander any district unless somebody on that committee isn't doing their job. Any districting plan will divide communities of interest in one way or another because communities overlap. It can't be helped. Somebody's going to be ticked off. Now, even without changing the number of districts, there are innovative ways to draw districts that we should explore with our 3 fair and equal districts. For example, Thurston County has a way of redistricting that divides the communities into metro, suburban, and rural, which actually might be a decent arrangement for Whatcom County. I'm not promoting that idea. It's just something to think outside the box, because there's more than one way to redistrict, and there may be some really innovative things that we could do. So in conclusion, Charter Amendment Propositions 1, 2, and 3 increase the diversity of opinion, expertise, experience, and objectivity on the County Council. It adds the responsiveness to the citizens of Whatcom County. And I would think the County Council should reflect the needs and preferences of the people of Whatcom County. Voters in each district elect 1 council person from their district every 2 years, 1 at large every 4. That should appeal to everyone living in Whatcom County. Anyway, I hope you'll at least consider the ideas I presented this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Carl. Okay, we'll open up the public hearing. What I'm going to do is go back and forth from opposition to favor, try to keep it as fair as we can. So the first name on the list is Abe Jacobson.
Good evening, Council.
Before you go, Abe, we've got quite a few people signed up, so Marie, you want to put the 3-minute clock on?
Good evening.
Go ahead, Abe.
My name is Abe Jacobson, and I live in Bellingham. I was interested hearing Mr. Upiano's talk. He said that 8 years ago, County Council defeated and frustrated the will of the people in the previous election. That is not at all true. That's an absolute mistruth. What happened is that County Council proposed an amendment which then went before the total population of voters for a popular vote. And by 2-1, they defeated district-only voting. So it's absolutely absurd to claim that the County Council frustrated the popular will. In fact, they allowed the popular will to be heard. An absolute untruth. Now, as regards this effect of District 1, 2, and 3 only voting, the problem for Bellingham is that it will permanently lock Bellingham into a minority on County Council. We in Bellingham work for a living and provide 65% of the tax base of the county. If we are locked into this permanent minority, which I think Mr. Dow was eloquent in his email in describing the design of, then the city of Bellingham is facing a loss of fiscal integrity. We are facing a long-term situation where our taxes get spent by an entity that is no longer accountable in a proportional manner to the voters of Bellingham. And that is called taxation without representation. And it is very rich that people describing themselves as Tea Partiers would attempt to impose once again, 230 years later, taxation without representation, and that's what this is shaping up to be.
Thank you, Abe. The next name is David McCluskey.
Hello, my name is Dave McCluskey, and I live in the 3rd Ward in the city of Bellingham. And it's true, not everybody's going to agree with everything in these propositions. So one of the key things that we have to do is find common ground and figure out what we all do agree on. And one of the things that we all do agree on is that there's too much money in local government in the elections. We have one side that talks about how Cole is spending money and getting into campaigns. On the other hand, we have the environmentalists getting involved in creating so much money. As Carl said, district-only voting will reduce the cost for the candidates. People want better candidates. How do we get candidates? Well, one way is to bring the cost down so people that may not be running will step up and run. The other thing is everybody wants fair representation. Fair representation doesn't mean we get to vote for every person on the council. We don't vote for every congressman. We vote for the congressmen that represent from the state of Washington. We don't vote for the representatives in Oregon. I mean, that's the way our representation is. It's no different than District 1 and District 2. District 1 is Washington. District 2 is Portland, or Oregon. We don't vote for each other's. That's not what representation is. Fair representation is your person that you're voting for, not voting for everybody. You know, I have different needs living in the city of Bellingham. You know, our district, we're going to have different needs somebody out in the county. It's not right that I vote for, somebody's representation out in the county. So instead of focusing on all the differences, let's focus where we all agree on. If we want to keep money out of the elections, and we want fair representation, then we need to vote to approve Propositions 1, 2, and 3. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Carol Jacobson?
Thank you. I live here in Bellingham, and I'd like to thank the City Council for having this hearing. I think it's terribly important. Bellingham, once again, is being divided. We're divided by congressional districts, we're divided by state legislative districts, and now, once again, someone's trying to divide us up politically. And let's use that word, politically. I have no problem voting for my neighbor. Not my neighbor next door, but my neighbor in the country. I love Whatcom County. It has a lot to offer all of us. And I think that for Whatcom County to go forward, we all need to pull together. And the only way to do that is by the good old American compromise. I totally reject Amendments 1, 2, and 3. I am so perturbed by this. I think I find it totally aggravating that with district-only voting, Bellingham City will be divided again. And as A pointed out so well, it's going to lead to the financial situation of taxation without representation. I think Proposition 9 proposes equally populated districts with citizens with similar lifestyles. I keep hearing that we have to have people together of similar interests. This will do it. We will have 2 city councillors, 2 from the northern rural county, and then 1 of 5th district, which will be the coastal region, and then 1 at large. Finally, people will be able to, in the primary, vote for who they want to represent them, and then we all at large vote for everyone. We are a county. We need to get together on some level, and if it isn't at the county level, I don't know, we're going to be totally divided forever and ever. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol. Delane Clisby?
My name's Delane Clisby, and it looks like the setup of the table is a little challenging for the vertically challenged, but so I can't see some of you. Anyway, my name is Delane Clisby, and my home is in Whatcom County. I didn't come prepared to speak about Proposition 1 here tonight, so I might be a little disjointed. I often hear that we're a democracy. We are not a democracy in this country. We are a democratic republic. We elect representatives to represent us in our different legislative districts, from the U.S. Senate all the way down to the county level. So I don't know why that Whatcom County has gone away from the way the whole county or the whole country has been structured with representative government. I hear now that the 3 districts that Whatcom County has are not fair. The last redistricting was done in 2010, and the way redistricting is done is the parties nominate 2 people. So the Whatcom Democrats nominated Mayor Linville, well, she wasn't mayor then, but Kelly Linville, and Hugh Beatty. And I would say that they are not really right-wing conspiracists. So that's where our current 3 districts came from. They were on that committee. And they did a lot to break up that pie shape that people talk about and put more of Bellingham into one district so that they're with like-minded people. I I don't want to vote for your representative. I want to vote for my representative. And as far as Propositions 2 and 3, I think it's, Iris was a little misleading. Those two propositions deal with a very narrow part of the charter. We're not asking to limit the county council to a 7-0 vote for the whole entire changes to the charter. Two very tightly controlled areas. How many of you voted for the salary commission to set the salary for our elected officials in county government? I did. County council should not be having a say in how they are elected, just like they agreed even, they are the ones who put that amendment to the people, that they should not have a say in how much they are paid. Same thing. Thank you very much. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you. Lisa McShane?
Lisa McShane, Bellingham. I want to clear up one thing I keep hearing. The county council does not have the power to amend the charter. They have the power to put a charter amendment before the voters, and the voters decide. So what they're talking about is not allowing the voters to decide on any amendments. One of the signs outside at the Tea Party rally this evening sort of summed up the goal of district-only voting. It said, no urban rule. Well, you know, I live in Bellingham. People in Bellingham don't want urban rule. We simply want our votes to count and our voices to be heard fairly, just like everyone's. My husband served on the county council for 8 years. When he was first elected, he was the first county council member who lived in Bellingham for quite some time. There hadn't been anybody who lived in the city on the county council for years when he started. We're 40% of the population, more than half the taxes. We care about the things that the county oversees, like land use, urban growth planning, the health department, the criminal justice system. We fund those things. We should have voices. We should be heard on the county council. At the Charter Review Commission, citizens came and they said that they want rural representation if they live in a rural area. People from Bellingham clearly want urban representation too. That's fair, which is why 5 districts makes sense. They follow state redistricting law, they're compact, and they to a lesser extent divide communities of mutual interest. It's important that rural voters are represented by rural people, and important that urban voters are represented by urban people. District-only voting does not do that. It doesn't come close to doing that. And I want to clear up one more thing I've been hearing, that the Seattle district-only elections took the money out of politics. Quite the opposite. I assure you, money is alive and well in the first district-only races happening right now in Seattle, and in fact, there's some concern over how much money there is. Because with district-only voting now, it's a little easier to influence, to pour a lot of money in and influence a seat. So that's a byproduct. Anyway, I urge you to reject Propositions 1, 2, and 3. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Jason Reimer? Is there a Jason Reimer here? Okay. Sandy Robeson. I'm sorry.
Sandy Robson from Birch Bay. I live out in the county, and I do feel like I'm represented no matter who's on the county council. Sometimes I agree with them, sometimes I don't, but I feel represented because I get a chance to vote for all of them. The public testimony of the February 23rd Charter Review Commission meeting lasted almost 2 hours. Most of that testimony centered on proposed Amendment 7, which sought to prohibit county funding of all Whatcom County nonprofits. After a 20-minute break, the commissioners then debated for the first time Amendment 1, Presiding over the commission that night was Chair Pro Tem Joe Elenbaas. After only 15 minutes of debate, Joe Elenbaas said to the commission, "The chair senses that you are ready to vote." 15 minutes. Some discussion of the charter commissioners ensued for a short time, and then again Joe Elenbaas called for a vote. That process in voting on Amendment 1 lasted only a total of approximately 22 minutes, and it was approved by the Conservative Commission majority. It is completely unreasonable that this hugely important issue was only given a total of 22 minutes of attention. Someone in that commission on either side of the political fence should have stopped that vote because the process of that vote was clearly not in the public's interest. Many citizens testified at subsequent charter meetings against Amendment 1, now Proposition 1, asking for their voices to be heard since they were not given any reasonable time to weigh in on Amendment 1, now Proposition 1. Those pleas were ignored. In the public interest, Commissioner Todd Donovan, I believe it was him, presented to the Charter Commission a similar amendment to the 5 Fair and Equal Districts Amendment that is currently Proposition 9 on the November ballot. The Conservative majority of the Commission voted against that at that time. In the public interest, once again, citizens asked the County Council to place via ordinance an Amendment 5 Fair and Equal Districts on the ballot for voters, and the Council approved that, which is now Proposition 9. Proposition 9 makes voting in our county more fair, especially if Proposition 1 for district-only voting were to be approved. It would leave many voters with limited representation on the County Council. This is exactly the case of the current state of affairs of the Charter Review Commission, which is comprised of 15 commissioners. I was only allowed to vote for 5 of those 15. That is unacceptable to me as a voter. It was certainly proven by the way the Charter Commission Conservative majority operated that choosing only 5 of 15 people to represent me is unfair. If Proposition 1 were to be approved by voters, then Propositions 2 and 3, if 2 and/or 3 were to be approved by voters, that would then make it almost impossible to provide an opportunity for voters to vote, to voters to change the way we vote in Whatcom County. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandy. Now, nobody else signed up in favor of Proposition 1, 2, and 3. Is there anybody here that would like to speak? Please come down. I'll go back and forth, but who? Chris, you want to come down and just give us your name for the record?
Chris Halterman, Whatcom County. I'm in favor of Propositions 1, 2, and 3, specifically because we are a representative republic. Every one of you council people here are voted by district only.
In the primary. In the primary.
In the primary.
Just in the primary, not
Okay.
in general.
Thank you. I am
Welcome.
corrected. But the smaller the government, the best representation that you have. We do have a very diverse county. We have a large urban area. We have a even larger rural area. And a lot of those people out in the rural area do feel disenfranchised because they don't get out and vote. Why? Because they don't feel like their vote matters. Why? Because there's far more density inside of the city of Bellingham. And if we're talking about wanting to have that diversity, then I believe that you should give the people the ability to elect somebody who will truly be accountable to them. If the person that you are electing only represents your district, then they're going to be out talking to the people who live in that district, not talking county-wide as far as what their district is looking for in representation. That's the reason for district-oriented, district-only, however you want to call it. It's having the closest representation is the best representation. And yes, we did have a very short, limited amount of time where we had district-only voting, and the council brought forth and the people voted. I read that, and that was back before I was actually even involved in anything political. I couldn't tell whether or not I was voting for or against district-only voting. It was a very poorly manipulative wording, and so when the people voted for it, I don't 100% believe that they knew whether they were voting for or against district-only voting. That was 8 years ago, And the people who, once they realized that it was gone, were not very happy. So I am for 1, 2, and 3. And are we going to have time to talk about 9 and 10?
Yeah, that's after we're done with this.
So, and the reason is, as I said, the people out in the rural area, from what I have determined, they said, why do I go vote? It doesn't matter because Bellingham outvotes me anyway. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Dina Jensen?
Dina Jensen, Birch Bay. I was disappointed to read a Bellingham Herald article this weekend that perpetuated some misinformation about the Whatcom County Council's ability to overturn charter amendments or change part of the charter that governs the election of council members. And I know Lisa mentioned that a little earlier, but this was actually in the Herald. And in the Herald Proposition 2 summary, it said, should the council need a 7-0 vote to overturn a charter amendment approved by 2/3 of the voters. And in that Proposition 2 summary, the way it's worded, it gives the impression that the county council can overturn a charter amendment, which of course they cannot do. The council can only vote to place via ordinance an amendment on the ballot, which would then allow voters to vote on that. And in the Proposition 3 summary in the Herald, it said that should the council need a 7-0 vote to change the part of the charter that governs the election of council members. And in that Proposition 3 summary, the way it's worded gives the reader the impression that the county council can change part of the charter that governs the election of council members. The council cannot do this. All the council can do is vote to place via ordinance an amendment on the ballot to then allow voters to potentially change the part of the charter that governs elections. So I'm going to move on from that. I just wanted to make that clear for people who are reading the Herald. And I just wanted to read a few of the reasons people expressed at Whatcom County Charter Review meetings for preferring countywide voting to district voting. And a lot of these reasons were never read or listened to by the commission before the commission voted to pass the proposed Amendment 1, which is now Proposition 1. People felt that the county council makes rulings that affect the whole county, not each district separately, so it seems unfair to elect representatives by district. People have expressed that they feel like they belong to and have interest in more than just one area of the county, even if their residence is in just one city or town. Therefore, they wish to be able to make a choice with their vote for each seat on a council that represents the whole county. People feel district-only voting, once it is approved, invites gerrymandering, and that the three-district proposal as drawn may be at odds with state law. And people feel district-only voting effectively sets up safe seats, in this case for members of the county council. So I urge voters to reject Propositions 1, 2, and 3.
Thank you very much. Okay, the next person in favor, come on down.
Good evening. My name is Linda Morell, and I'm from Whatcom County. And thank you so much for holding these hearings tonight. And pardon me, I'm a little bit nervous. This came to me while I was sitting here listening to the testimony. And what I heard and what I'm hearing is that we're sitting in the city council chambers in the city of Bellingham, and the city of Bellingham represents 100% of the citizens of Bellingham and 100% of the taxes that Bellingham citizens pay into the city of Bellingham. That brings them representation by you, so that they are 100% represented by the city council of the city of Bellingham. Now, what I also heard was that the city of Bellingham also contributes 65% of the taxes in Whatcom County, therefore entitles them to 65% of the representation of the county council in Whatcom County. Let me finish. And therefore, as a county council, as a county of Whatcom citizen, I'm entitled to 45% of the representation of the county council. Now, that sounds very pedantic, and it sounds very black and white, but the city of Bellingham citizens have representation by the city of Bellingham council. Am I right? Okay, you're representing the city of Bellingham. The county council of Whatcom County represents the entire county of Whatcom. That is our only representation for the county, okay? We don't have any other council to fall back on.
Thank you.
And so therefore, I do support Propositions 1, 2, and 3. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mike Sennett?
Hi, I'm Mike Sennett, formerly of Birch Bay, currently of Bellingham, and I'd like to draw attention to the false equivalency of voting countywide to voting for state representation or national elections. I think Whatcom County is an organic political entity as well as an environmental one, so anything that happens in the county, everyone that lives here should have a voice in it. And therefore, I'm against Proposition 1. Proposition 2 and 3, as one, came from the County Charter Commission, and from what I saw and heard and read, it was a thoroughly undemocratic process, corrupted by outside money, and really the main intent of it was to facilitate the GTP coal terminal. And I don't think I'd be standing up here right now if it wasn't for the coal terminal. So, and once again, I'm against 1, 2, and 3. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Is there anybody else in the crowd that wants to speak in favor of Proposition 1, 2, and 3? Come on down.
Good evening. Thank you for having this hearing. My name is Matthew Goggins, and I live on Fraser Street here in Bellingham. And before I speak in favor of 1, 2, and 3, I just wanted to correct a few mistakes. Chris Holloman made a mistake with regards to the City Council, but also the first speaker before Carl, Iris, she made some mistakes too. She mentioned that 2 and 3 would basically keep the county council from proposing charter amendments in general, but as the other speakers have pointed out, that's not correct. It's just the specific 2 areas of electing themselves, and any proposition passed by a 2/3 majority. Anything else would be the regular supermajority. Another error, which was repeated by another speaker, is that the 8 years ago, when the county council, led by Ward Nelson and Barbara Brenner, 2 Republicans, ironically, to repeal district-only or district-oriented voting, it had been passed 10 years ago or 11 years ago by a 68 majority. 68% of the county voted in favor of district-only voting. That was the clear preference. And then that next election cycle, before anyone had even gotten a chance to before the cycle had gone through the county council, Ward Nelson wanted to get reelected through the whole county because he was in the city. And they put on a very confusing ballot measure, and it went over my head. It went over the heads of almost everybody I know. The wording of that ballot measure was, shall the electors, the voters for a for the county council representatives be a citizen of Whatcom County? Should the voter be a citizen of Whatcom County? So if you voted in favor of that, you were voting against district-only voting, which had passed two years before overwhelmingly. It was deliberately worded as confusingly as possible, and even then, it did not pass overwhelmingly. It was not a 2/3, 60% vote to repeal. It was only about 52%, and 48% still voted in favor of district-only voting with that confusing wording. So let me address why I'm in favor of 1, 2, and 3. Basically, it's just there's many reasons. If I had to single out one, it's that right now you have all these votes on the county council. There are 7-0, 7-0, 7-0, even though Sapal Sidhu is from Ferndale. He's worked in Bellingham for a long time. And there isn't that voice from the farming community, from other rural residents in the north and eastern parts of the county. Their voices just don't even make it to the table. It's just poor governance. There isn't anyone representing that point of view, and so the decisions aren't well informed. So I think that's a real problem in the county. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bill Henley?
I think I'll pass. Thank you.
Okay. Is there anybody else wishing to speak in favor of Proposition 1, 2, and 3? Seeing none, we'll go to the rest of the list. Ken Collier, excuse me if I pronounce your name wrong.
Thank you. My name is Ken Collier. I live in the unincorporated county. And looking at the debate over Proposition 1, I can't help but think of situations like the state of North Carolina, where a minority of statewide voters have somehow been converted into a lopsided majority of congressional seats through manipulation of the system. Now, granted, in this case, the proponents of Proposition 1 did not design the system, but they're taking advantage of the system as it exists right now. This is a target of opportunity they're trying to grab at this moment in order to exploit the arrangement of the current 3 districts to give them a virtual permanent majority on the county council. And Propositions 2 and 3 are intended to lock this in, so this will be a permanent majority in the county council. I think it's of interest that proponents of Proposition 1 don't seem to be very interested in a 5-district arrangement, because that wouldn't give them a guaranteed majority, a permanent majority in the county council. They seem to be quite opposed to that. They like the system that the districts that exist right now. And perhaps most disturbing about 1, 2, and 3 is this aspect of Propositions 2 and 3 that would deny the voters the opportunity to consider a change to these provisions by making it virtually impossible for the county council to propose them, or to pass them on to the ballot. So the sum total of these 3 propositions does not speak very well for the democratic purposes that the proponents claim to favor. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Diane Foster?
Okay, Diane Foster. I live in Whatcom County. I hadn't planned to speak originally, but I've heard some things tonight. Someone said that it's not represented. We talked about taxation without representation, and that we don't elect officials in Oregon, but I would say that Washington State does not pay Oregon State taxes, whereas people in Bellingham do pay Whatcom County taxes. So that makes a huge difference. Now, I remember 8 years ago, when the public wanted to go back to countywide voting at that time, Barbara Brenner wanted to talk about a very important issue with some fellow council members. And this council member turned to her and said, "Butt out, Brenner, it's not in your district." And that made her really angry. And so she got on the stick and returned us to countywide voting, almost single-handedly, I think. So, and I believe she still feels that way. So, and when people say that, you know, District 1 is progressive and the other two are not, so when I think of District 1, I think of Ward Nelson and Kathy Kirshner. So I don't think it's really all that left-wing. And just last December, I found out Kathy Kirshner moved from District 1 to District 3 so she could run against someone who has already lived there for 30 years. Just an interesting observation. So I think that we all need to vote on everyone in our whole county. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Diane. Eugene Lewis?
I've got myself up here to speak against Propositions 1, 2, and 3. And I guess one of the things I'm really concerned about right now, in terms of, I'm going to take this a little bit into a personal trip, and that is the manner in which facts and stories are twisted around, you know, to mean different things. You know, the coal issue, I think, is a very big and important issue. And I think everyone in this county should have a voice on that, and not just the people in a small local district where the coal terminal might be. I think a lot of the other speakers have addressed the rest of this, I think, pretty well, better than I can. And I probably will just leave it at that and say that that is my real main issue that I think I can address or would like to address tonight.
Thank you, sir. Anybody else? For or against? We're going to close the public hearing. Okay, we will close the public hearing, and now we'll go on to Proposition 9. And before I read the names of the two that will be speaking on that, Peter's going to read the title.
Proposition 9 is the number of council districts and at-large positions. The Whatcom County Council has proposed an amendment to the Whatcom County Charter concerning the number of council districts and at-large positions. This measure would amend Charter Sections 2.11 and 2.12 to create 5 districts of equal population. If passed, there would be 1 council position in each of the 5 districts, plus 2 at-large positions that would be nominated without regard to district. Explanatory statement. Under the current Whatcom County Charter, Whatcom County is required to be divided into 3 districts of equal population. In each district, there are 2 council positions. There is also currently 1 at-large council position which is nominated without regard to residents in a particular district, resulting in a total of 7 council positions. This amendment would require that the county be divided into 5 districts of equal population. Each of these districts would have 1 council position. In addition, this amendment would increase the number of at-large positions to 2, resulting in a total of 7 council positions. And I would just say that we do not have Proposition 10 on the agenda. Just want to be clear about that.
It's just Proposition 9. Okay, Brooks, you were the last one on the list for in opposition to 1, 2, and 3. You want to go ahead and speak now, and then we'll go to the 9. Go ahead. I forgot to read your name. I'm sorry. I didn't see you sitting there, so.
Well, I was sitting in the back because I was coughing too much.
Go ahead.
Well, thank you. And thank you for holding this public hearing. I've heard some criticism about why would Bellingham be holding a public hearing about this. Frankly, we are 40% of the county. We are part of Whatcom County, and I really am pleased that as the leaders of 40% of the county that you decided to hold a public hearing and hear what people had to have to say about this very complicated and controversial ballot that's coming up for us. About Proposition 1, I do oppose it. I oppose 1, 2, and 3. And one of the reasons that I oppose 1 is what I hear in talking with the people outside before the meeting started. They somehow feel that they're not represented with the 5 and 2. And when I ask them I say, well, gosh, you'd have your own representative with 5 and 2. They somehow feel that Bellingham has an advantage over them. And I really am struggling to understand why they think that Bellingham has an advantage when Bellingham's 40% of the county population. However, I do understand that Bellingham does need and will get out the votes, and that what Bellingham does when there is an election, we do perhaps have more of a turnout than the other 60% of the county. So from that standpoint, I guess I can understand how they might feel that way. But that's the name of the game, is getting out the vote, and everybody should vote. So not to encourage, but at the same time not to discourage that point of view. Again, I think that Proposition 1 is out of the dark ages. It's going back instead of going forward in terms of what we need to be doing as a county. We're the only county in the state that has 3 districts rather than 5 or 7 or 9. So why do we keep thinking that we need to have only 3 districts? The district-only part is another aspect of this whole thing, but I do oppose this Proposition 1 and 2 and 3 because it really, how can they think that the county council doesn't have the right to be the legislative party that has the most ability to give the voters a chance to vote on what they want to? So I get to come back for 4, 9, right?
Yeah, 9.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we'll now draw the names. So who goes first for Proposition 9? And the winner is Tim Douglas.
Thank you very much, Council President and council members, and also the citizens of Bellingham and Whatcom County who are watching. These issues are clearly very important to everybody in this room, and I think across the county, and for very good reason. And for that reason, I want to express my appreciation to the council for making it possible for us to talk a bit about Proposition 9 and explain why it is so important to the future of Whatcom County. Bottom line is, this will assure a fair and equal representation for everyone in Whatcom County. And first of all, let me give you a bit of history. It was 40 years ago almost, 40 years, that we adopted our charter, which is our local constitution. But look at what's happened in those 40 years. Our population in this county has doubled. The diversity of the communities and interests in the county have broadened significantly. And so it's not the same place it was even when we adopted our charter. But still, we're stuck with these 3 old districts, just like the county commissioner form of government that we got rid of in 1978, a form that simply led to pork barrel politics and impasses on so many important issues facing our county. So I think it's time for us to look at what we can do to overcome that, because after all, we're all citizens of Whatcom County. Not only the people in rural Whatcom County, not only the people in small town Whatcom County, but the people in Bellingham, Whatcom County. We all have something at stake in this. After all, the county determines much of our tax level. The county determines how to conduct the criminal justice system, how to make sure that there are mental health and other important services in the county, how to assure that we have not only adequate quality of water, but adequate quantity of water to serve our farms, our cities, and the fish who live in those streams. So there are a lot of very important issues that we're facing. I was pleased as mayor for 13 years in Bellingham to work very, very closely with all the other communities in Whatcom County. We met quite regularly. We tackled some really tough issues. We've helped figure out how to fund public health so that people's health was taken care of in this county to the extent we possibly could. In those years, we were flat on our back economically. Every town and rural Whatcom County knew that. We worked together, and in just 3 years, we produced more than 3,300 new jobs in Whatcom County. And we did it by cooperating together, not by fighting all the time. So when we have 3 districts, let's look at what it means right now in Whatcom County. Well, do the math. State law, the state constitution requires that districts be of equal population. Well, if you divide the population of Whatcom County by 3 and try to figure out how to divide it up into just three districts, we will always have parts of Bellingham in every single rural district. And what does that mean? It means that rural Whatcom County voters resent the fact that they have to compete with Bellingham voters at every council election. And I understand that. Meanwhile, Bellingham voters have absolutely no guarantee that they will always be represented in a 3-district system. So we need to take a look at this. How can we better tackle the problems that we all face in a way that is fair and representative? I'd like to draw your attention, please, to the map here, because it shows what Proposition 9 would do to make representation fair and equal in Whatcom County. What it would do is to create not 3, but 5 districts. 3 of these council districts would be entirely in the rural portions of our county. On the left, you could see there would be a coastal district: Blaine, Birch Bay, Ferndale, and Lummi. In the central portion, Linden, Sumas, Everson, Nooksack, the communities and the rural farmland around them that really focus much more on agriculture than the rest of the county. And then to the east, there would be yet another rural district, no Bellingham in any of these districts. That rural district would represent the forests and the lakes, Lake Samish, Lake Whatcom, and the people who live around them. Each of those clearly, and everybody I've talked with in Whatcom County, everybody, including for 4 hours at the fair, agreed the same thing. Yes, there are distinct communities of interest in these rural areas, and they need a voice at the table. So in addition to those 3 rural districts, Proposition 9 would provide 2 districts in Bellingham, a North District and a South District. There would, in addition to each of these 5 districts, each of them would have an elected council person representing their particular perspectives and interests. But in addition, there would be 2 at-large representatives as well, and they could live anywhere in Whatcom County. So, if Proposition 9 is approved, as I'm hopeful it will be, we'll have 5 districts and 2 at-large, making a 7-member council exactly the same size that we have right now, but clearly more attuned to the individual interests of these various communities that are part of this diverse Whatcom County that we have. So, it's really time for us to make a shift now, to get much fairer and more representative. We need the best thinking we possibly can, representing all the kinds of lifestyles and interests that exist in our very diverse county. I'd like to suggest that this would have been a matter that would have come automatically forward by the Charter Review Commission and be placed on the ballot so that we all had some choice in how we would like to achieve fair representation in our county. Unfortunately, the Charter Review Commission absolutely refused to bring that forward to the County Council so it could go on the ballot. So 2,100 voters came forward signing petitions and brought them to the County Council and said, please, give us a choice on the ballot. And the Council, after listening to a long public hearing and considering all the pros and cons, decided, yes, we will do that. And so it went to the ballot. But I'll tell you, we really had to fight to keep it there. I spent 2 different hearings at Skagit County Superior Court because a dissident group of people in Whatcom County who did not want this choice to be available to us as voters tried to block it and strip it from the ballot. They sued the County Council, and the judge listened carefully to all of the arguments. They had several charges that they made, and the judge ruled in the end against every single one of those charges and said this matter should rest in the hands of the voters, not in the hands of the judiciary. So this gave us an opportunity to keep that matter on the ballot, and that's where it will be November 3rd. Proposition 9 gives us an opportunity for fair and equal representation that will really consider many, many different points of view in Whatcom County. Your vote is your voice. And I'm urging you, we fought hard to give you a choice. Please be sure to return your ballot. Vote to approve Proposition 9 so that we have 5 fair and equal districts in our county. And then, once this has been approved, a districting committee, as required by our county charter, will sit down and determine the final boundaries of these 5 districts. And then, when all of that is done, we can get on with tackling the tremendously challenging issues that face us in Whatcom County. Water quality and quantity, job opportunities for the 21st century, and yes, even whether or not a coal port should be permitted in Whatcom County. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. Next will be Delane Clisby speaking against Proposition 9.
I just want to quickly clarify how much time that I have.
I don't know.
Because I was told 5 minutes, and that seemed like an awful long 5 minutes for Mr.
That's all right. You'll get as
Douglas.
much time as he did.
Oh, well, I wish I would have planned for more then.
Well, that's all right. You'll come up with something, I'm sure.
Yeah.
I know you. You will. You will come up with something. That's the only reason I said it. I wasn't trying to be funny. I know you will. Go ahead. It won't go against your time.
Okay. My name is Delane Clisby, and my home is in Whatcom County. The 5-district proposal was never meant to be fair and equal, as the proponents of this plan claim. From the start, this plan was a way to counter the district-only proposal that they knew would be on the ballot. Charter Review Commissioner Todd Donovan says it all when he says in an email to fellow commissioners that this plan will really complicate Republica's efforts. In another email, he says, I don't think the 5 districts is an improvement over what we have now. And at one point, he said that this proposal is less bad than the district-only proposal. You have to ask yourself, is that the right mindset when passing legislation? Is less bad good enough? If you think that our government should operate in an open and transparent way, you will want to vote against Proposition 9. Strategy meetings took place behind closed doors out of the public eye to put together a plan to submit this proposal to the County Council. County Council member Ken Mann and City Council member Dan Hamill both participated in these meetings. In order to be sure proponents of district voting had little time to react, The proposal was submitted to County Council by Tim Douglas at the very last minute. It was put on the council's agenda only 3 hours before the meeting. No committee meetings were ever held about this proposal. No open discussions among county council members. There was very little time for comment from the public. On the other hand, the Charter Review Commission discussed this proposal several times over the course of 6 months. In the end, they rejected it on a bipartisan 11-4 vote. And I would like to point out that Ally Walker voted no on this proposition in Charter Review Commission, and yet she's up on the slide now, being promoted as, I guess she's changed her mind. I guess a woman's allowed to do that. If this proposal passes, you will only have one representative for your district, and you will get to vote once every 4 years for your representative. Currently, you have 2 representatives, and you get to vote for one of them every 2 years. Very clearly, this proposal means less representation for you. If the County Council had taken more time to vet this proposal, they would see that it has some very serious flaws. If this proposal passes, the Port of Bellingham and the PUD would have different districts in the County Council. I know voters are never confused. If the proposal passes, District 3 will have no representation for 20 months. If the proposal passes, District 5 may have no representation for 44 months. The Charter Review Commission spent a lot of time making sure that a change to one section of the charter didn't conflict with another part of the charter. The County Council did not take such care, and now we have conflicts. For instance, the language in this proposal for setting up the redistricting commission conflicts with current language in section 4.41 of the charter. Will the County Council send the correction to the voters in 2016? Or will they just go ahead and make a change to our charter with only an ordinance? Bottom line is this oversight puts redistricting in time for the 2017 candidate filing week in jeopardy. Another conflict arises with the language for the Charter Review Commission. The charter specifies 5 members per district for the commission. If this proposal passes, there will be 25 commissioners. Talk about chaos. But the conflict doesn't stop there. If passed, Proposition 10 would require a 10 of 15 vote of the Charter Review Commission to send an amendment to the voters. They specify 10 of 15. They don't just say supermajority. They insert 10 of 15. Very specific language. Last I checked, 10 was not even half of 25, let alone a supermajority. So again, another conflict. Will the voters be asked to fix this error? Or again, will the County Council just change our Constitution with an ordinance? Proposition 9 is messy, super messy. In summary, here is what Pete Kremen said about the proposal at the County Council public hearing. 3 districts are plenty. When I say it's time-tested, it is. It ebbs and flows. We get changes in political makeups and ideologies on the County Council. This proposal was put on the ballot by folks who wanted to confuse the voters of Whatcom County. It is poorly thought out with many negative consequences. Does the Bellingham City Council really want to put their names on this flawed proposal? I urge citizens, no matter what the City Council does, to reject Proposition 9. Thank you.
Thank you, Delane. Okay, we'll do the same thing we did last time. We'll start with the first name on the opposition list, and that's Matthew Goggins.
Thank you again, Matthew Goggins, Bellingham. Just to add a couple more details to what Delane mentioned. The Charter Review Commission several times over the course of their meetings from January was an organizational meeting, from February through June, considered Proposition 9 in whatever form it was at the time and rejected it because it really did conflict with a lot of different statutory requirements for redistricting, including the fact that you have to go to a redistricting commission, the fact that you have to use the census data every 10 years. There were just a lot of issues with it, and they rejected it after carefully trying to figure out what would be the best way to handle it. Whereas the county council, apparently various parties, including Ken Mann, Tim Douglas, and other people, have been plotting for months to, like, just sort of, as Elaine pointed out, put it through at the last minute. What does that mean? It means June 23rd. It was put on the agenda 3 hours before the meeting. Nobody knew about it except a few people who happened to see the agenda at the last minute. And then that was just to put it on the agenda of the county council on July 7th. So basically, it was only on July 7th that people had a chance to have input into this. And a lot of the flaws were pointed out at that time, but basically the council had made up its mind already, and they voted unanimously to put it on the ballot. Now, it's true that the voters get to vote up or down, but there are public open meeting requirements. There are other ways of conducting business that the county council ignored. And just as you can make criticisms of the Charter Review Commission, the way the county council handled this was, in my opinion, very poorly done. As to the merits of the proposal, I think Mayor Douglas did an excellent job of speaking on behalf of Proposition 1 because he spoke about the needs for the districts to be represented and have a voice on the council, and that's what Proposition 1 does. However, that's not what Proposition 9 does. Proposition 9 creates these 5 districts that I'm looking at right now, 2 in Bellingham plus 2 at large. The at-large districts that we have now, there is an ebb and flow, as Peter Kremen pointed out, but right now it's all Bellingham, except for, like I pointed out before, Sapos to do. So 6 out of 7 are in Bellingham with these at-large districts. So basically, you get to pick your neighbor in the primary to run, and then Bellingham, has that advantage on the 2 at-large seats plus their own 2 seats. So they're not guaranteed a 4-seat majority, but it makes it very hard for people to fight that sort of preponderance of voting power in Bellingham. It really does create a tendency for Bellingham to have that 4-seat majority on the county council. If you had a 5-district plan with no at-large, then I could support a lot of what Tim Douglas was saying here tonight. But in fact, he was actually speaking in favor of District 1 with a lot of his arguments, although, of course, he would disagree with me on that. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank
again.
you, Matthew. Abe Jacobson?
My name is Abe Jacobson, and I live in Bellingham. The advantage of the 5 districts is that it does not split communities of interest. Today, a farmer on the South Fork of the Nooksack is totally overwhelmed by a majority of urban hipsters in his district. And today, an urban hipster in the northern part of Birchwood is swept into a district which will probably not represent him. So the idea of the 5 fair and equal districts is to try to map things so that communities of interest can stay together. And in this sense, it is a more fair representation of Whatcom County. It does not have to be, however, for the November election. We can still vote at large by defeating Prop 1 and accepting Prop 9. We can have the best of both worlds. We can have nominations done from districts, so we're absolutely certain to get people representative of communities of interest. And then in November, let all of the voters hold those candidates accountable. What's so scary about majority rule anyway? Thank you.
Thank you, Abe. Nobody else has signed up, so we'll do the same thing we did last. Chris, you want to or whoever wants to speak in opposition. No, we're going back and forth, I'm sorry. Okay, we're in opposition now. Only one person signed up, so anybody that wants to speak, we'll go back and forth.
Chris Alterman, Whatcom County. I'm speaking against Proposition 9. First of all, because of the way it was brought forth, there's no disputing that there was a lot of behind-the-scenes activity that brought this proposition to the Whatcom County Council, and it was placed on their agenda 3.5 hours before the regular meeting. It was passed with a consent agenda at that meeting. If you look up the definition of a consent agenda means that you're bringing forth something that requires very little discussion because it's non-controversial. I don't believe that changing Whatcom County from 3 districts to 5 districts is non-controversial. Speaking towards the fact that 5 districts, fine if you want 5 districts, but the point here is that when you redistrict Whatcom County, it's supposed to be done with current census data. It's done every 10 years. We are already halfway through the census data, so we're using basically old census data if they were to redistrict at all. Again, the Charter Review Commission looked at Proposition 9. They decided it created more problems than it solved, which is why it was turned down by a supermajority vote of 11-4. Yes, there was a trial where a judge said that he would not involve the judiciary to prevent this from happening, and also because it had not been either passed or failed by the vote of the people, so there couldn't be anyone who really had the ability to come forth with its lawsuit to say that they had been harmed. He said, but should it pass, that would be an entirely different matter that the judiciary would be able to step in and vote on. He repeatedly talked about how the Whatcom County Council did a very sloppy and shoddy job and had to backfill everything that they put on the ballot for this ordinance, Proposition number 9. I ask you to please vote no on Proposition 9 because it creates more problems. When it comes to all of our other districts, you've got fire districts, you've got cemetery districts, you've got school districts. All of these things need to be addressed and dealt with in a very combined way, not in a way where all of a sudden now you've got 5 districts. So what do you do with everything else that's happening out there? It's a very poorly thought out. It was brought forth in an extraordinary way by the Whatcom County Council in a backroom deal, and I'm asking you to please say no to Proposition 9.
Thank you. Lisa McShane.
Lisa McShane in Bellingham. There's been a lot of misinformation from the opponents of this. I trust you, just like I trust the voters, to see through things that simply aren't true. I'm here to speak in favor of Proposition 9. I urge you to vote, to pass a resolution to approve Proposition 9. Our 3 districts, as you've heard before, they're a relic of a commissioner system we left behind because we left the pork barrel politics behind. All the other charter counties in Washington State, when they moved to being a home rule charter, they went to 5, 7, or 9 districts. We are the only ones still with our old county commissioner system. They're elongated pie shapes, which means they're not compact. They divide Bellingham, and then they put Bellingham in each of those districts. It doesn't make sense. It's time for us to add districts. People in rural areas should have rural representation. People in urban areas should be represented by people who understand their issues. I urge you to approve this. Thank you.
Thank you. Next person in opposition. Go ahead, Carl, if you're next.
Thank you, and thank you for having this hearing, by the way. I don't think I remembered to thank you when I was up here before. I'm opposed to Proposition 9, and not because I think it's fundamentally a bad idea. I was actually rather intrigued by the idea when it was first brought up in the Charter Review Commission and watched with some interest as the discussion went back and forth. And the problems that were encountered were what eventually shot it down in the Charter Review Commission. And Todd Donovan introduced it, and I believe Richard May also, and they gave a very compelling argument. And so other members of the Charter Review Commission asked for more details and how we would make the transition from one to another, and brought up some of the other issues about the PUD districting and Port Commission, among other things. And those questions were never adequately answered to their satisfaction, which is why they decided not to bring it forward. So, in my opinion, while this may not be a bad idea, it's not a complete specification. So when we vote for this, if we vote to approve this, we'll be voting for an idea and not a specification. And it's sort of like, you know, we have to vote for it to find out what's in it. I just don't think that's the way to run the government. I think if we would take the time to work through these problems in an open fashion that doesn't have to be done by committees that may or may not be responsive to the public, I think that it would be better to make a complete specification, put the whole thing before the voters, and then say, this is what you're voting for, rather than just an idea. And by the way, I know that the drawing these districts is informational primarily, but it's the council ordinance that introduced this thing actually calls them out, which is not something that you can actually do. The districting committees have to do that. So these districts are not what you're going to end up with. Anyway, I would encourage people to reject this, wait for it to be refined better, and then have it put back on the ballot when it's complete. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mike Sennett?
Hi, I'm Mike Sennett, Bellingham, formerly of Birch Bay. I'm for Proposition 9 because I went out and gathered signatures on a petition to get it in front of the county council. I thought I was participating in democracy, but I guess I was engaging in a backdoor deal. Well, one reason I'm here is because I may be misinformed, but I'm understood that if we do go to a district-only voting, that we may run afoul of state law by having only 3 districts. And so, having seen the Charter Commission already waste my taxpayers' money by suing the county council over getting this proposition on the ballot, I'd like to see a vote on it so that we could potentially save some money. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Is there anybody else that wants to speak in opposition to Proposition 9? Come ahead.
My name is Dave McCluskey, live in the city of Bellingham, the 3rd Ward. I was on the Con Committee for Proposition 9, so you can read a lot of my discussion in the ballot pamphlet. Do we need redistricting? In some ways, yes, I think we do. But it's not a knee-jerk reaction that we just put together on a whim and throw out for a vote. It's kind of like replacing the lights with LEDs, right? Initially, they seem like a real easy thing till you get into the details. And then it's like, oh, well, what do we do here? You know, same as like Carl pointed out with this map. You know, I don't think Mr. Douglas was appointed to the redistricting committee yet. So really what he's presenting doesn't mean anything. I mean, I could present a map with lines on it just as well. Everybody could do that. In fact, everybody should. I mean, we should vote this down so that we get together and figure out what the district should be, what is fair. This is not fair. This was a backdoor deal. I filed an ethics complaint with the county because there was a lot of unethical things that happened. There's a lot of money. There's $75,000 that went out to get some of these signatures from the environmentalist groups to push this forward. I mean, that's not how we should operate. We need to come together. I know we have sides, people on this side, people on that side. We need to come together. When two sides get together, the best decision will come out of it. It's not something to fight about. It's not a tit for tat. It's not, I'm going to put this up because you guys did that. It's about coming together and coming up with the best solution so that my kids, when they grow up, will have fair representation. Thank you.
Thank you. Dina Jensen. Okay, we'll go back to the other side. Is there anybody else that wants to speak in opposition to Proposition 9? Going once? Going twice? Okay, we will go on down the list. Bill Henley. Attaboy, Bill, you're doing a great job tonight. You do very well. Luann Chapman.
My name is Luann Chapman. I'm from Bellingham. I'm in support of Proposition 9 and the 5-district concept. Our 3-district voting does not meet the needs any longer of our growing population. Bellingham has doubled in size since the 1970s when this 3-district borders were laid out. 3-district voting actually divides communities, and it's unfair to rural voters. Rural voters deserve districts that don't include Bellingham. They have a right to their own representatives. I'm against district-only voting, as it limits me to voting for only 3 candidates instead of 7. I believe the 5-district, yes, you have only 1 representative to represent you, but you also have 2 at-large candidates you can also support. I want all 7 candidates to be answerable to me, so I would prefer voting for all 7 rather than 3. The 5-district proposal gives rural and urban citizens fair representation. Thank you.
Thank you. Carol Jacobson.
I first encountered the idea of doing something about redistricting on my way to a meeting when I was given the paper, please go and get signatures. People coming into this meeting need to know about 5 districts versus 3 districts. So I guess I'm that unpaid person that was on that $75,000 expenditure that never went out. I like this. It came out as a compromise during the Charter Commission. It is elegant. It speaks to democracy. It is fair. It puts people in their lifestyle and interest and environmental groups. I believe that the county employees, the county staff are quite capable of taking care of the nuts and bolts of putting fire districts in their appropriate place. The county is very good at looking after the county, and I support this wholeheartedly. It's elegant. It takes care of Bellingham. It certainly takes care of rural Whatcom, and it gives us all a compromised democracy, which is what we all live with. But this is super. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol. Ken Calier.
Well, our current 3 districts are kind of unwieldy. They're likely in violation of state guidelines about preserving existing communities of related and mutual interest. In fact, they're almost the furthest thing from that, the way they're divided up in pie cuts. And the repeated refrain we've heard from opponents of the 5-district plan, who happen coincidentally in large part to be opponents of the 5-district plan, who happen to be in large part proponents of district-only voting, is that they don't have representation, or they feel they don't have representation on the city council. Nobody's speaking for them. Well, the three districts we have now, there's no guarantee they'll ever have representation. We could have 7 county council members from Bellingham. We could have 7 county council members from the county. And people might feel they have no representation. A lot of people might feel they have no representation. With the 5 districts, the candidates will have to come from these areas that preserve existing communities of related and mutual interest. They will have to have, by the system, will have representation on the county council. They may not always agree with their representative on the county council, but they've got somebody from their community on the council. And this is not a, certainly as I see it, this is not a plot to lock in a council majority for the progressives. It doesn't do that by any means. There are 2 at-large seats, which would be the swing votes. You could have 2 progressive council members from Bellingham, 3 from the rural area, but if the whole county votes for those 2 at-large seats, that is going to carry the majority on the council. It's not going to be fixed as either rural or urban. So it in fact, is a means of countering a rather cynical attempt to exploit the current situation to establish a conservative majority in perpetuity. And so for these various reasons, I think that the details can be worked out. I don't think our county is incapable in this regard, so I would vote in favor of Proposition 9.
Thank you, sir. Diane Foster?
Yes, I'm in favor of Proposition 9, and for all the reasons that have been stated already. When I first heard it at a Charter Review Commission meeting, I have to say I thought it was a little strange, and I have a degree in political science. But anyway, so over the next few months, when I studied it in more detail, I thought, this is brilliant. I mean, it really is brilliant. And my friend Ronna that lives out in Everson, when she first read it, she thought, oh, this is same thing, kind of strange. And the more she's read the detail, the more she's convinced that this really is the answer. So I just want to speak in favor of it. And also, to the question of transparency, I really had planned on attending the last Charter Review Commission meeting, but I understand it got called suddenly on a few hours' notice, and there's no way I could have changed my schedule. And even one of the members of the commission was on vacation at the time. So I think that was a little underhanded, and I don't know if anybody ever filed an ethics complaint about that, but they should.
Thank you. Brooks Anderson? Bill, they're not following your lead. Go ahead,
Yes,
Brooks.
it's getting kind of repetitive, isn't it?
Go ahead.
Well, what I want to say mostly is I want to see something happen out of this, out of you sitting here and listening to all of us for so long. I really want to see resolutions from you. I don't exactly know what the details are about how that happens, but there's no reason for us all sitting here listening and being patient without there being some result out of this meeting. Really do, again, appreciate your leadership and your willingness to represent 40% of Whatcom County voters, and I am in favor of Proposition 9. I cannot imagine us continuing to have 3 districts when no one else in the entire state does. So I'll leave it at that. Just do something. Thank you.
Eugene Lewis? Attaboy. Nancy J. Lewis? Oh, my goodness. Okay, is there anybody else who wants to speak in favor or in opposition? Go ahead, Sandy.
Sandy Robson, Birch Bay. I really liked what Tim Douglas had to say. I think it really resonated with me, and I think a lot of people. People really did fight hard to get this on the ballot, and they really shouldn't have had to fight that hard. I was one of the ones that went to the hearing. Well, first I should say, I am definitely in favor of 5 fair and equal districts, and I hope that you all will be too, and provide some guidance for voters in that way. And if I didn't make it clear, I'm against 1, 2, and 3. I don't know if I made that clear. It's my first time speaking here and being in here. I went to that courtroom hearing that Mr. Douglas was speaking of, and I not only sat through that, but I listened to the recording of it tediously afterwards. And what was provided in descriptions of that by Ms. Halterman and Carla Piano and a couple others, maybe just those two, I'm not sure. It really wasn't what transpired there. They did, as Tim Douglas said, really really disagreed with all the charges in terms of the circuit judge there. And he did say that maybe the county council could have dotted a couple more I's and crossed T's, but he didn't see anything improper. There was no problems with the Open Public Meetings Act. He was very clear about all of the things that people were referring to, some of the ones here tonight. So I wanted to make sure that that was clear, being someone that witnessed that and then went through it. Lastly, there's just so much force against trying to have this voice for people with 5 fair and equal districts coming from kind of I guess, mostly conservative viewpoint. And I do know that also, unless something's changed, there's plans. I did hear on Ms. Halterman's radio show that there's working towards a referendum already, trying to get that, I think, going through the process to try and repeal that should it get voted on. So there's so much going on against this, and I'm just really hoping you can see how hard people are fighting to have this voice, to have 5 fair and equal districts, and it is probably in some ways a response to district-only voting being passed so in the manner it was in the Charter Review Commission, and there's nothing wrong with that. I just wanted to make some of that clear. And also lastly, Mr. Goggins had talked about what the 2008 ballot amendment said, and I read that, and that's actually not what it said, but I don't have time to read it through, even though it's on my phone.
Thank you, Sandy. Okay, is there anybody else before we close the public hearing? Come on down, sir. Yeah, step forward. Well, let him go first, Matt, and then you. Go ahead, sir.
I get paid in coffee, so...
Get closer to the microphone so we can hear you.
Oh, hi. Hi, my name's Kieran. I'm a political enthusiast. I love maps. I love congressional maps. I love redistricting. I love everything about politics. I don't like gerrymandering. I despise gerrymandering. As many of you know, Illinois is gerrymandered to benefit benefit Democrats by splitting the city of Chicago into all these other districts. And Ohio is gerrymandered because they gerrymandered, despite the fact that Ohio is a 50-50 state, it's a swing state, they're literally, I believe, Ohio has just 20 electoral votes, or anyways, Ohio has like 15 or 14 Republican congressional districts and 4 Democratic districts. That is absolute madness to me. I hate and when I look at this map, I have to say this map looks pretty fair to me. The 5 districts, I mean, 2 Bellingham districts, 2 rural districts, and then 1 district that's determined by Blaine and Ferndale. Blaine and Ferndale, as many of you know, or any political junkie know, both of these towns are swing towns. Both of these towns voted for Dino Rossi in his 2010 Senate run, and I believe both of his gubernatorial runs. However, both of these towns have also voted for Barack Obama in 2012 and 2008. And so when it comes to the districts alone, it's pretty fair. And I mean, with the 5-district plan, you do get the 2 at-large districts, and some say that would benefit the Democrats. But I mean, quite frankly, Whatcom County has voted solidly Democratic in the last 3 presidential elections. It hasn't voted for a Republican candidate since 2000, when Ralph Nader split so much of the vote away from Al Gore. So in the last 6 of the 7 presidential elections, this has been a Democratic county, and if it creates if the 5 districts and 2 at-large creates a Democratic majority, well, I mean, it's a pretty Democratic county. So I mean, I believe in proportional voting. I believe in all that, and I really think that 5 districts and 2 at-large is a good thing. So thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Thanks, Kieran. Thanks also to the City Council for holding this hearing. My name is Matt Petrini. I am the Clean Energy Program Manager for Resources for Sustainable Communities. We represent over 15,000 members in Whatcom County, and I also grew up in Whatcom County, so I care a lot about the outcome of this whole situation. And I'm here to tell you that, in fact, there was a plan put onto the ballot that was put together in closed-door meetings with minimal public input. It was then rushed onto the ballot under questionable circumstances over the objections of many members of the public. All of that is true, and a considerable amount of special interest money was spent to get it there. It is the 3-district, district-only voting plan. That is what happened to get the 3-district, district-only voting plan onto the ballot. And when we saw this happen, a lot of people in our community were really concerned. They came to the charter review meetings and they spoke out, and they said that they didn't think this was a good idea. And ultimately, none of those concerns were heard by the Charter Review Commission. They did nothing to mitigate the damage of what they had rushed through, and what Sandy said was 22 minutes. It was completely unacceptable. And so what did we do about it? Well, we thought of some ideas that would make this more fair. We thought of some solutions that would actually be able to garner public support and not force the voters to decide between something that is blatantly wrong and everything that we have right now. It gives them an option for something that is reasonable, for something that is fair and equal and representative of what our county stands for and who we are as a community. And then we asked the county council, who is the elected government of this county, all of whom received many more votes by like tenfold than anyone who was on the Charter Review Commission, if they would put this forward. And they said, sure, but only after we do an exhaustive public hearing that we notice 2 weeks ahead of time and allow everyone the opportunity to speak. And people did. They showed up, hundreds of them. And in another hearing like this one, totally lopsided, said, this is a really good idea. Why don't we get the opportunity to vote on this? We should do that. And we went out and we collected 2,100 signatures of people in the public. How many signatures were collected in support of the district-only 3-district plan? 0. 0 people signed on in support of that during the course of the Charter Review Commission process. So if you're looking for a solution that is broadly supported by the public, that is representative, that is compliant with state law, that has gone through a rigorous process to arrive on the ballot, this is it. This is the solution. 5 fair and equal districts will preserve communities of interest and will follow state law and will give us what we need as a community to prevent this scheme from gerrymandering our county. So thanks a lot.
Thank you. Next.
Judith Akins from Bellingham. I'm speaking in favor of Proposition 9, and that was very powerful. And what other people have said has been very powerful. I just wanted to, when I was sitting up thinking, change is hard. Change is complicated. And I trust what somebody else said at the Whatcom County to get this done, and so we don't have to wait 48 months to get a representative if we're in one of those districts. I just think we have to do things now. We can't wait 10, 20 years for things just to happen and people decide and negotiate. We have to start now on these things. We have to get our act together. So I'm asking you to bring us up to current standards in Washington and give us 5 districts, better than 3. Thank you.
Thank you. Please, everybody line up so I can see, because otherwise we're going to close the public hearing. So if you want to speak, come line up against the wall, move all the way forward. Go ahead, Iris.
Hi, everyone. Once again, my name is Iris. I live here in the city of Bellingham. I want to share one of the reasons that I'm really excited about 5 fair and equal districts, and that's the people behind the amendment. I feel like we've gotten a bit of a bad rap over this in the last hour or so, that we're scheming and that we're I don't know, bankrolling, and I think it's important that we know who came up with this idea and who's working really hard to inform the public about it. You heard from Tim, our former mayor. You just heard from Judith. She volunteers with the Sierra Club. I've really enjoyed working with her. We have Max Bronsma, a young gentleman who lives in Linden but works here in Bellingham, and he grew up in Kendall, and he thinks that he should be able to vote and for representatives of the entire county. And there's a lot of other folks who are working really hard on this, and I'd like to encourage everyone to check out our website, fairwhatcom.org, where you can learn more about the issue, where we're very transparent about the people who are working to get more involvement on this issue. And I also want to encourage folks who are opposing this issue to get past the process arguments. That's really all that I've heard tonight. And, you know, it's gone to court. They threw it out. It's going to be on the ballot. Let's have a real conversation. And if you have any opposition that's really meaningful about 5 fair and equal districts, I encourage that dialogue to happen.
Next.
Hi, everyone. My name is Josie Ellison. I'm a student up at Western Washington University. There's just a couple of things I wanted to mention. I am in favor of 9, but I think there's a couple of things that are kind of next level that we've been talking about but haven't really talked about. First off, I think we should really be looking at what communities we're talking about when we're talking about breaking up communities in district voting like this, and why it's important to make sure that communities have representation. It's something where we can say communities as much as we want, but who is that actually going to affect? Secondly, I would just like to take a second to say that for every time that something has been mentioned previously that is a hard to read piece of legislation or something that is hard to understand coming to the ballot, I'm confused as to why we didn't take time to make sure that these are more clear than the ones that have come previously. I do a lot of voter registration up on campus, and it's a little bit frustrating to try and convince 18-year-olds, 19-year-olds that are just learning how to vote how to read these things when folks that are obviously much older are still having problems reading it. So if we're seeing these problems continually, maybe we fix it with the next couple of proposals that we bring out, just because, you know, accessibility is a little bit important, just a little bit. Also, I'd just like to take a second to mention that these folks, Pro-9, are the only ones that I've seen on campus. So we've got actually just about 3,000 students that are registered to vote on campus, and these are the only people that are actually coming to talk to students about, you know, what these proposals are going to do, you know, how it's going to affect us. And I think that says a lot both about, you know, who cares about providing information to around 3,000 students that are registered to vote. And it also says a lot about what they feel like the students are going to perceive these things as. If you're not even willing to come to campus to talk about it, I think that says a lot as well. And also, honestly, I can't remember exactly when it was mentioned, but something about, you know, our current methods are time-tested. You know, the 3 districts are time-tested, and I would just like to say that time-tested is not always the best metric of equity. There's quite a lot of things in the history of this country that are not equitable in any definition of the word, that have been very much time-tested. So, just a couple of things I think to keep in mind.
Thank you. Next.
I'm Andy Douglas. I am formerly of Birch Bay, and I currently moved down to Bellingham because of health issues. And I was one of those people that went to most of the county commission review hearings, and I also went to the 2 county council meetings where we discussed 5 fair and equal districts, which I'm in favor of. I also got signatures on petitions. In fact, I actually nabbed Tim's signature on it. I happen to know that most of 5 fair and equal districts was hashed out in front of the County Commission review because we tried to get it through them. And I'm one of the people that actually called and asked all of my county commissioners to discuss this and put this on the ballot. And there was many of us doing that. Many, many citizens of our county, both in the city and outside the city, did ask for this to be on the ballot. Also, as a person in the tech industry here, I've been part of the Linux Fest that happens at BTC, which is all things open source. 5 fair and equal districts would be much more lean and agile in terms of handling the problems of our county. Each area has specific interests which are not shared by other parts of the county, where problems can be worked through and dealt with on a much faster basis and brought to the county council in order to be able to deal with problems. Problems are a tax on business. Business cannot progress rapidly when we are stymied and stopped by county councils that don't deal with problems. Our current county council does deal with those problems very well. So thank you very much for hearing us.
Thank you. Go ahead, sir. You're going to be our last speaker.
Oh, what an honor. My name is Edward Ury, that's spelled U-R-Y. I am a Bellingham resident, and I wasn't originally planning on speaking tonight, but I felt the need to address some falsehoods that were stated in the opening remarks by Delane Clisby. Unfortunately, she's left the room and won't benefit from this clarification. There was some confusion about what the charter says about number of commissioners. Really quick, just to clarify, it very clearly states there would be an even number elected from each district to total 15. It specifically says 15. If we have 5 districts, there will be 3 from each district. The charter also very clearly states that the county council has the authority to place charter amendments on the ballot with a majority of 5 out of 7 votes. And so the whole idea that this was somehow out of line for the council to do this is just ridiculous, and especially given that thousands of people asked them to do this. And all through the Charter Review Commission process, when people spoke about the district-only voting proposal, they were asked by Commissioner Todd Donovan if they also would like a district that did not include Bellingham if they were a rural representative. He specifically asked them, polled people on this, and almost all of them said that they did want a district that did not include Bellingham, that they wanted to be represented in their interest and not compete with Bellingham voters. And so Todd Donovan proposed an alternative district-only voting amendment called, well, it was Amendment 11 at the time. It was voted down, but again, there was some equation that this was somehow the same as what the council proposed as Prop 9. They're different proposals. That was a district-only voting proposal as an alternative that would also create 5 districts. Of course, this addresses only the number of districts, Prop 9. That was voted down. And then later, of course, there was a meeting in the East County in which almost everyone there from the East County spoke against district only, and they made a motion to repeal it and revisit it so maybe they could address that and maybe create a different version of district only voting that might also address this problem. They chose not to do that. And so thousands of people, over 2,100 signature signers, asked the council to put this on the ballot, and now we have a chance to vote for it. There was also a question somehow that Bellingham controls the county council majority. Only 3 of the county council members live in Bellingham. The others live in Sudden Valley, Ferndale, Linden, and the unincorporated county. I guess they count as Bellingham somehow because they're not Republican. But if it comes to the question of if you want to be represented, Matthew Goggins and Delane Clisby live in District 1. So they would be in a Bellingham-dominated district. So, and evidently, competing with Bellingham voters, it doesn't seem to be the main issue for them. It's having a majority that's favorable to their interests. And that's what district only around 3 districts is designed to do. And just to, this question about gerrymandering it's really not about that. It's a math problem. If you're going to divide the county and Bellingham's 40%, 3 districts requires that all the voters, all the districts include Bellingham. Can I? Okay. Well.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Okay. First of all, let's give yourself a hand for a great evening tonight. Anything the council wants to say before we adjourn? Yes. Go ahead, Roxanne.
Well, I just, first of all, want to express appreciation for every single person that came here tonight, and, you know, with the exception of a couple of things, the fact that everybody spoke respectfully of one another and respectful of the issues, because this community dialogue is so important for us to have. Your voices all need to be equally heard, and so I thank you for respecting that process.
Okay, anybody else? Terry?
Yeah, I just want to, I'll echo the same thing. I thought people handled themselves very well. You stuck to the issues, presented the issues well, and that's what this was all about, to try to bring out the different elements of these issues. These are very important issues to the voters, and that's why we held this today, to try to get information. And I think people from both sides did a very good job, and I just, you know, again, thank you for being respectful to each other and for presenting your ideas well. Thank you.
Okay, anybody else? Seeing none, meeting adjourned. Thank you very much.